just recently asked me to recap seasons 1 through 5 of The Handmaid's Tale. It is a really hard watch, so I totally get not really wanting to sit down and watch the whole thing, especially in today's political climate. So here is season 1 recap from my memory, so I apologize if I missed something. I'm just kind of going based on what I remember. The first episode is really informative. We are introduced to Gilead. Gilead is like this religious conservative group that they've overtaken the American government, so this is kind of like the new government system. The first scene in the first episode is just awful. We see June, we see her daughter Hannah and her husband Luke. They're running, trying to escape Gilead. They're trying to make it to Canada. They get separated. We hear a gunshot. We assume that Luke is dead. Hannah and her daughter are running and they get captured, and Hannah gets ripped away from her arms and June is taken elsewhere. And so we do see June. She's sitting in the Waterford house. Now she's being referred to as Offred because she's of Fred Waterford. We are introduced to his horrible wife Serena. Serena is pretty vile. Right away we see her referred to like the last handmaid that was at their residence as kind of like a dog that needed to be housebroken. She lets June know that Fred is her husband and not to get any ideas, and of course June doesn't have any ideas. She's stuck there. So seeing everyone in the household, we're introduced to Nick. Nick is the Waterford's driver. We're introduced to Rita, who is a Martha. Marthas are basically women who are not fertile that are forced to be house servants. A handmaid is unfortunately a woman who is very fertile that basically is given to commanders and their wives as a way for them to have children, because the birth rate in Gilead is so low. Children are a rare commodity. So unfortunately, June has been turned into a handmaid. And during the first episode, we do see her after she got captured. She gets sent to the Red Center. We see when she gets in the Red Center, she recognizes her friend Moira, who is her best friend from before everything went crazy. We are introduced to a girl named Janine. Janine is a young woman. She doesn't quite realize that she shouldn't be opening her mouth, and she gets punished by Aunt Lydia. Aunt Lydia is this kind of authority figure in the Red Center. She is an aunt, and she is very cruel, is teaching these women how to become a handmaid by punishment and just really cruel behavior. We later see that Janine's eye has been taken out because she, spoke out. And so this is enough for June to realize that they kind of have to stay in line or else they will be punished. So there are lots of rules for handmaids. In Gilead, handmaids are not allowed to go out by themselves, and so they are basically paired up with another handmaid. June's companion is a handmaid named Offglyn, and she views Offglyn as kind of like this kind of snooty, pious person. They're walking through the town and they don't have a whole lot to talk about, so they make very casual, safe conversation about the weather and stuff. And so she kind of has a certain expectation of who Offglyn is, but we later learn that Offglyn is exactly like her. She has a very similar mission in mind. And we learn that Offglyn is a part of the resistance. Also in the first episode, we see this ceremony. Unfortunately for handmaids, they are basically in this terrible ceremony that involves the wife and the husband. Really, it's just a glorified essay. And obviously we see that Serena is not so happy about it, but we later learn Serena is kind of the main reason Gilead is the way it is. And so we don't feel bad for Serena because she is one of the reasons why this is happening, but she's very jealous of June. She's very threatened by June. At the end of the first episode, all the handmaids are taken to the square and they're told to punish this man that attacked a handmaid. And so you see all these women kind of unleash their feminine rage on this man. And so you see Gilead is a very violent place, especially for women. The next episode, we see that Janine is pregnant and she's about to give birth. It's a very strange thing. June is taken to the Putnam house, which is the house that she's been stationed at, and everyone's treating Mrs. Putnam, Naomi, who's a terrible person, like she's the one giving birth. Really, it's Janine. All the wives are going through breathing techniques and stuff with her, when really Janine's the one that's in complete agony. And the whole birthing ceremony is very strange, but she gives birth and then baby is immediately taken from Janine and given to Mrs. Putnam, which is terrible for Janine. June learns more that Offglyn is, part of this resistance, and she's kind of letting June know that June can be very helpful if she gets more intel from Fred Waterford. Nick approaches June and lets June know that Fred has requested a private meeting with her. And June is pretty nervous, but then she learns that Fred just kind of wants to play Scrabble with her, which is not really allowed because women aren't allowed to read or write or anything, but he kind of treats her like it doesn't necessarily matter. And so she starts to talk with Fred and is kind of forming a friendship with Fred, and she's excited to tell Offglyn about it. But the next day, when she goes to tell Offglyn is not Offglyn. She's been replaced by another woman. We learn that that off Glenn has basically been labeled as a gender traitor because she fell in love with another Martha. They had a relationship. They kill the Martha, but then they keep off Glenn to be a handmaid in another residence. But unfortunately, they basically mutilate her, and it's just terrible. Lydia and a guard show up at the Waterford residence to basically interrogate June to see how much she knows about Glenn. They start beating her, and Serena runs in and treats June like she's pregnant. June doesn't say anything because, of course, she's like, oh, she might treat me nicer if she thinks I'm pregnant. But she eventually has to tell Serena that she's not pregnant. Serena is infuriated with her. She beats her and throws her into her room and locks her in there for 2 weeks. So while June is trapped in the room, she's kind of going crazy. She looks in the closet. There's some Latin words in the closet, and she's wondering what they mean. She later gets taken out to the hospital because Rita finds her kind of like she thought she fainted in the room. Later on, they have like a ceremony, and Fred is not able to perform the ceremony, despite Serena even offering to help him, but that doesn't happen. But later on, they have a Scrabble game again, him and June asks Fred, what does this Latin phrase mean? He basically lets her know that that Latin phrase means, don't let the bastards grind you down. He also tells June that the last handmaid that was there killed herself because she was just so unhappy, and June kind of uses that to her advantage and is like, you know what, that might be my fate too. I just want to get out of the room. Please let me out of the room. Please don't lock me in the room anymore. And Fred arranges it so she is free despite Serena's displeasure. Later, Serena is kind of desperate for a kid, and she approaches June and kind of lets her know, I don't think Fred's able to have kids, so I've arranged it so that you and Nick can get together, have sex, and then have his baby. And June reluctantly is like, okay, and she lets her know that Nick also agreed, and so she arranges this incredibly awkward encounter with them where they're doing it and Serena's just standing there watching. It's terrible, and it's like she's basically saying both of them because both of them cannot say no. And later on, they have another ceremony between June and Fred and Serena, but Fred starts like touching June's thigh, looking like he's really into the ceremony, and June later confronts him and is like, you can't do that because Serena's gonna get wise to what's going on. Please don't do that, and he apologizes. Later on, June finds that the original Off Glenn is in town. She's back. She learns that her actual name is Emily, and in an act of defiance, Emily runs, grabs a car that's been left unattended and runs over a couple guards, and then she's later taken away in a black vehicle. And June, kind of emboldened by her resistance, she goes and she like sleeps with Nick. They have like a really nice, passionate, consensual time together. Later, June is told that someone from the Mexican trade delegation is coming to discuss different trade options with Gilead, and she's told to be on her best behavior. And so someone does show up at the Waterford house, and she's surprised that it's a woman. She's basically told to lie to this woman and tell her like, oh yeah, I love being a handmaid. It's great. We're not oppressed. And Serena also has a conversation with this woman, and the woman kind of questions Serena like, aren't you upset that you've written this book and you aren't even allowed to read it or like write any more books anymore? So we later find out that Serena is an author. She used to be a conservative activist, and she was honestly quite influential in the decisions that like Fred and the other leaders of Gilead have made in the country. But because she's a woman, she hasn't really been allowed to do anything else. Later on, June is horrified to learn that basically what Gilead is willing to trade are handmaids because the birth rate is down everywhere. Later on, approaches that woman and is like, hey, I lied. It's terrible here. Please help us. Please help me. And that woman is like, I can't help you. I'm so sorry. But then her assistant approaches June and says, hey, your husband's alive and I can get a message to him for you. And he hands her a pen and paper, and she's able to write a message for Luke. So we learned that Luke is alive, which is kind of awkward because June has just kind of started this weird affair with Nick. And she's also, obviously having to talk to Fred. So it's just a big mess. We get a couple flashback moments in several episodes. We see kind of more about Serena and Fred's background, how influential Serena was, and how much of an activist she was for this weird conservative feminism. You see what happened with June and how things started changing kind of slowly and then quickly all at the same time. We see her and the other people that worked in her building all get fired, all get told that they can't work anymore because they're women. We see her later realizing that her bank account has been closed because she can't have a bank account because she's a woman. It's just, a lot of terrible stuff happen all at once. You see guards and people on the street kind of stopping any opposition by firing into the crowd. We also get flashbacks of what happened to Luke the day that June was, taken. We find out that he was shot, but he survived. He was kind of taken care of by this resistance group that helped him get across the Canadian border. And so like 3 years later is like the present day where we are now, and he gets the note from June and he finds out that June is alive and he's so excited. Later on, Fred kind of is getting closer and closer to June and he's more interested in her, and he approaches her when Serena is out of the house, and he basically gets her all dolled up and takes her to a place called Jezebel's. It's basically a brothel for like commanders and higher up people, and June recognizes that her friend Moira is there. Like, she is there. She apparently tried to escape. Her and June both tried to escape the Red Center. June was caught, but Moira kind of escaped, but then she got brought back to this brothel, and so they reconnect. And later on, June gets told that if she wants to join Mayday, which is the resistance group, that she needs to go back to Jezebel's and pick up a package. And so she convinces Fred to take her back to Jezebel's, and she unfortunately is unable to talk to Moira, and she gets taken to the room. She has to have sex with him and stuff, but then he brings in Moira later because he thinks that June has like some sort of, thing for her, but they're able to talk, and June tries to get Moira to like join her in the resistance. But Moira is afraid, she's afraid to get involved, and so she says no originally. We learn kind of what happened for Janine after she gave birth. She was basically kicked out of the Putnam's home after the baby was so old and she didn't have to breastfeed anymore, and she was restationed in another commander's house. But during the ceremony, she kind of freaked out, and later on, June gets notified that she needs to come to the bridge because Janine has taken her baby, and she's standing on the edge of the bridge and she's threatening to jump. And so June is kind of the only person that is able to talk to Janine and reason with her. And so Janine gives June the baby, and she still jumps over the bridge. Thankfully, she survives, but she gets put into a coma, and it's just really, really sad. Later on, June goes to the butcher, and she finds out that Moira has, in fact, gotten the package for her and given it to the butcher who's given it to her. And then we find out that Moira has actually escaped Jezebel. She was able to kill someone, one of the clients, steal his clothes, steal his car. She was able to get over the Canadian border. She was able to reunite with Luke, so she is safe and sound. But things kind of hit the fan for June because Serena finds out about Jezebel. She finds out that June has been kind of going off with Fred, and she, punishes her. She throws her to the ground. She forces her to take a pregnancy test, and then we find out that June is actually pregnant. And so Serena confronts Fred. Serena is so angry with Fred, and Fred is obviously not very kind back. And so Serena just lets Fred know, hey, by the way, that's not your baby. June is pregnant, and she had sex with someone else, and she's pregnant by that guy, not yours. So Fred is obviously very upset by this. And I think the worst scene in the entire season 1, Serena basically puts June in the car, and they drive to a building. She gets out of the car, locks the doors, and then June sees that Serena is going to a school. She brings Hannah out, June's daughter. June is just banging on the window, trying to get, she's trying to get the door open. She's trying to go see her daughter, but she's locked in that car. And Serena comes back in later and basically is like, you have my baby in you. And if you take care of my baby, I'll take care of your Hannah. And, it's just heartbreaking, awful for June, because all she wants is her daughter. All she wants is to see her daughter, to talk to her daughter. And Serena is just so cruel. So you kind of see just the gravity of Serena's cruelness, and it's terrible. Later on, June and all the handmaids are told to come to the square because they have to take care of something. Aunt Lydia is there and basically tells all the handmaids to pick up a rock and that they are going to stone Janine because Janine put a baby in danger. And all the women are obviously extremely upset, and June drops her stone. She drops the rock, and one by one, all the women do, and they all refuse to stone Janine. This is an act of resistance that all the handmaids do together collectively, and the season ends with like this black van showing up at the Waterford residence, and they take June away. And obviously the Waterfords are kind of upset because obviously June is pregnant, and so they're like, don't take her away, but they do. The season ends, and we're not entirely sure what's going to happen to June, but that's how it ends. I'm sure there's a lot of things I didn't touch on. I mean, there are lots of moments between June and Nick, how they kind of form this bond, how they do care about each other. At some point, Nick does kind of distance himself from June because he's afraid. Things are getting a little too dangerous for them to continue to meet and, see each other in secret. The Handmaid's Tale season 1 is really, really good though, and it sets you in this new environment. You're kind of learning the rules. You're kind of learning how terrible it really is for women, how many rights have been stripped away. basically how their government works, stuff like that. And I mean, as the series goes on, we obviously learn more and more. But June is an awesome character, and this is such an interesting and powerful story. And so the first season's a really, really good watch, but it is incredibly difficult to get through. So I understand just probably wanting a recap of what happened.